Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ivar, and I am joined here by my colleague, Michaela. And on behalf of both of us and everyone else here at WiscNet, we would like to welcome you to our yet another Teach and Learn session. And today we are very excited about our guest, and we would like to introduce him to you right away. We have a regional director and co-founder of K12 Mr. Eric Langford. Eric is a cybersecurity professional with over 20 years of experience in information security. He has worked in many different verticals, including banking, multinational retail, multinational pharmaceutical, higher ed, and K12 education. Eric led the call for security collaboration among school districts since 2018. Eric also is an NYU Cyber Fellow at the NYU Tandem School of Engineering. If you have any questions during Eric's presentation, feel free to leave them in our chat. Myself and Michaela will keep an eye on that. And to remind you all that the recording will be emailed to everyone who registered for this Teach and Learn. Without further ado, I will pass the word on to Eric. Eric, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Ivers, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it. And let me see here. Let me get share my screen. Give me just 1 second and we can get started. All right. Hang on. Second. Okay. Well, we just tested this and I wasn't having problems. Now I'm trying to.
That's always how it goes, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, there we go. Let's do that. Zoom. Okay, here we go. Let's see, close that. Zoom. Okay, there we go. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, so what I was going to speak about today is just a little bit about K12 which stands for the Kindergarten through 12th Grade Security Information Exchange. And we are an ISAC, and I'll go into a little bit what an ISAC is and how they came about, that is focused solely on and dedicated solely to K12 cybersecurity for all K12 organizations, not just public schools, but private schools, charter schools. We have members that are departments of education, state departments of education, regional education centers, and places like WiscNet. So we're open to anything that's in the K-12 space. And so just a couple of things I'll touch on. I think everybody probably that's on this call understands, the issue with cybersecurity in schools is that it's changing. It's becoming more difficult to protect a larger amount of assets, and that's where the root of the problem is how do you protect everything you need to protect with all the new threats that are out there and all the issues that you're facing with limited resources and staff and things like that. And some of the challenges, these are we put out a yearly annual report. This one that was released at the beginning of the year, and the challenges are pretty much the same every year. There's student and staff data breaches, third-party risk, all kinds of ransomware attacks. And what all this does, of course, it disrupts school, it costs money, and there's a loss of trust in schools and things like that. This is just a list of some recent ones you've probably heard about. Most of these in the school, probably the most recent is Los Angeles Unified School District. They got hit by ransomware. Probably the most, this happens to vendors as well. The most recent vendor was Seesaw. So again, this is something that just happens continually in the K-12 space. So this is what we like to call our four horsemen of cybersecurity. And what I like, what we try to do is, typically there's four ways organizations, and this is just not schools, this is all organizations, how they deal with security. And the first is denial. They say, look, it's not going to happen to us. What do we have to worry about? We're a small school, we're a small business. Nobody wants our information. The second is delusion. It's like we have nothing of value. And that's, when I first moved from the corporate world where I spent most of my career into K-12, I had an actual head of a school tell me, or of elementary school tell me, well, why would anybody want kindergartners, pictures and all this stuff? And I said, well, that's not necessarily what they're after, but I'd sure love that kindergartner social security number and other information about them. So that's the other, and again, we all have things of value within our organizations, whether you're a school or not, that are sold and valuable out there on the dark web. Delay is the other one. We can't afford it. This is the big one where people say, we just don't have the money right now, so we're going to put it off till we can. And then the last is deflection, which is saying, hey, cybersecurity is not our job. Why should we worry about this? We're a school, but and we've got an IT person. That's the IT person's job. And that's one of the things that, we try to get organizations, schools to understand, is that it's not just an IT issue. It is an overall school organization issue that needs to start at the top, superintendent, head of schools, all the way down, so that you understand why it's important to your organization. And then the problems are, schools, they're overwhelmed and they're under-resourced, and a lot of it. And while there's tons of cybersecurity guidance that's out there, most of it, I'd say the majority of it, is not geared towards schools. It's geared towards others. It's very broad. It's just it's hard to digest. It's so much that the schools look at it and go, great, where do I even start? And then, so let me go into a little bit more about K12-6. As I said, we're a real-time cyber threat intelligence sharing. We're a nonprofit member. We fall under another nonprofit organization called Global Resilience Federation, which I'll also talk about in a minute. But we offer a number of different things to members and non-members. And what I'm going to be talking about today is our Essential Protection series, which is something that's available to both members and non-members. So a little bit about the history of ISACs and K-12. So ISACs were originally commissioned in around 1998, and the reason was because there was a few things. There was there was a bombing, the Cole bombing, the first World Trade Center bombing, the Oklahoma City bombing. So a lot of it was physical, and the reason they felt they needed something, they said, look, the government said, we've got these critical infrastructures, and we need to make sure that all these companies that are in these infrastructures are communicating with each other, so that if something does happen, like these bombings, that we can keep things up and operating, or that they are able to, share threats between each other. And at this time, it really didn't have much to do with cybersecurity. The one other issue that was pertinent for the creation of these was the Y2K issue. And so these were started by a presidential directive that said, hey, go out, create ISACs, which stands for Information Sharing and Analysis Centers, for these specific sectors. ISALs came along later, because what happened is, if you'll notice, there's just these specific sectors. A lot of organizations that were outside of those sectors said, hey, we have pretty important information as well. We should be able to set up similar organizations. So there was an executive order in 2015 that said, hey, let's create information sharing analysis organizations, so that anybody could create a type of organization. So K12-6 is an ISAC. We specifically work with other school districts, like I mentioned earlier, as our members, and our whole purpose is to share information around any types of threats, be it physical or cyber. And so the way we kind of came about is my career was mostly in the corporate world. About 2015, is when I moved into the K-12. I used to travel a lot, and I decided I didn't want to travel much anymore. And I took a job at I'm in Fort Worth, Texas, and I took a job at a private school here in Fort Worth just to help with their overall IT, not necessarily cybersecurity, but I got in there, I thought, wow, they don't think about cybersecurity. And so I started looking for an ISAC that they could join, and there was nothing out there that was specific to cybersecurity. And so, or for K-12, excuse me. So I just kind of put it in the back of my mind and said, okay, I'll just, maybe if there's an opportunity later on, something comes up, we'll see what we can do. Around the same time, Doug Levin, who's the director of K-12-6, had also started what he called the K-12 Cyber Incident Map. And Doug's background was not in, excuse me, cybersecurity. He was more of a policy guy, education policy, had worked with organizations like CETA and others, and had worked a couple with different legislations and, writing some of the policy around, the information superhighway when that was all coming out, excuse me. And so Doug started seeing in the news these incidents happening. He thought, nobody is really, I'm seeing these incidents, but I'm not really hearing anybody talk about it. So he created this map and just started mapping those issues. And so about that time is when I moved from the private school to a public school to help them build out a cybersecurity program. And I had reached out to Doug and said, hey, Doug, I think there's a need for an organization, some type of ISAC just specific to K-12 schools. And he said, hey, you're right. Let's start working on that. So at a security conference I was at, I met the president of Global Resilience Federation. And Global Resilience Federation, they are a nonprofit that manages and supports about 17 different information sharing communities. And so like K-12-6. And so I said to her, I said, look, there's a gap in the whole ISAC structure, and it's K-12. Nobody is focusing on K-12. And she said, you're right. And this was about 2018. And so that's when Doug and I and GRF started working on creating an ISAC specifically for K-12. And so that is where K-12-6 came from. And now, one of the benefits of us being under the Global Resilience Federation is we have immediately when we were able, it allowed us to create it very quickly because they already had analysts, a SOC, and a lot of things in place that we could rely on. And we also have the ability to have some, cross-sector information sharing. And so, and the way that works is our analyst, and so we have dedicated K-12 analysts, and then the other organizations and ISACs within GRF have analysts as well. But the way it works is those analysts, they pull information from public sources, private sources, from cross-sector sources, and they compile that, and then they send it out as alerts and different things. Plus we get information from member submissions. And what it allows us to do is especially with the cross sectors, say for instance, somebody in K-12, a school says, I'm seeing this, I'm not finding any information about it online. They send it to our SOC researches it, they reach out to other sectors and say, hey, has anybody else experienced this? And, somebody in financial may say, hey, you know what? We saw this a few weeks ago, and this is what we did to remediate it. And then they'll take that, our analysts would then take that information and pass it back down to our members to say, hey, here's some things you could potentially do to remediate this situation. So that's just one of the ways that we operate underneath that Global Resilience Federation. And as far as benefits, I'll just go through these real quick. We've got threat intelligence sharing that we provide to members, information sharing. This is probably the biggest thing and the biggest benefit of any type of ISAC. And that's the information sharing, where people can get together and say, look, here's where I have trouble. And other people can say, well, I've already done this. We do something we call brown bags, which are our member only events. And we had one a while back where we had a member that had been through a ransomware incident. And they said, look, we want to share with other members how it happened, how we went through it, how we walked through it, the results, so that other members won't have to, they won't have to deal with the same things. Hopefully they'll be in a better place. So that's one of the most important parts of information sharing communities. Of course, we have community of practice where you have anybody that's in the community can ask questions of others. Professional development, we provide training and other things like that for members. Technical assistance, and that's through our SOC, as well as we also have something called virtual CISO hours or office hours, so that you know, a member that if they just don't have anybody to ask questions about security on anything, they can call into the virtual CISO sessions and ask. They're just open sessions, and of course, as I mentioned, the cross sector collaboration. So the biggest thing I want to talk about today is our essential, what we call our K12 Essential Series, and they're national cybersecurity standards for school districts. And we put these together specifically because our members and other schools had reached out and said, look, yeah, there's all this great information on cybersecurity out there, but it doesn't apply to schools. It's broad, it's too much, it's not easy to start. So what can we do? And so we put together these essentials, which are what we call our essential cybersecurity protections, our standards of practice, a district self-assessment tool, and cyber incident response runbook. And so the essential protections are 12 recommendations that we have. Now, these are nothing new. These all map back to NIST cybersecurity framework and the CIS controls. So nothing new, but we worked with members. Everything we do is working groups with our members. And we came together with them and said, okay, what are the best things, the easiest to implement, the things that can give you your most bang for your buck that you can do to protect your school? And this is what we came up with. Now, one thing I'll caveat you on this specific list is we did this list last year, and we are in the process of re-releasing it for this year that will be slightly changed. And the reason we do that is, even when we first released it, we said, look, these things are going to change. For instance, stop class online and class invasion, so Zoom bombing. That, at the time when we released this, was still a big deal because of COVID. Schools weren't necessarily thinking about configuring their whatever tool they used, and it was an issue. That's really no longer an issue. So that is going to fall off. And actually, I'll just give you guys a kind of a sneak peek of how they will be coming out. And so you'll see they're very similar to what they were, but we've added things like, you know, the importance of incident response, the importance of cybersecurity training for staff, and a few other things like that. And so they will be, as I go through some of these other tools and this slide too. So this one in particular, one of the things that I wanted to have when we came out with these was a single page document. And the new ones will be formatted in the same style, so that you as an IT professional or anybody could take this document and give it to somebody who's not an IT person and say, look, this is some things we need to do. And that those people, you know, superintendents, board members, whoever it may be, principals, could look at this and go, okay, I can understand this. It's not this, you know, 20-page document. I get this. I can understand this. That was the importance of having, you know, this. And so our format will not change from this. It will just change the content a little bit. And so the way it works so the essential protections, as I mentioned, were the main thing. The standards of practice is what I'm going to show you here. So every essential protection will have and I'm using example 1.1 filter out malwares. Every protection will have a single page document like this, that is a document that just gives some general information about it, why you want to do it, its impact on users, its implementation cost, just a general, you know, real quick, you know, how do I know if I'm doing it right, things like that. And there's a single page for each one of these protections. And what it allows you to do is go through and kind of assess your risk of where you are. And that's, you know, are you at risk? Basically, you know, you don't, and in this case, we don't have any malware control. Or are you baseline good? And then of course, better. And better, of course, is where you want to get to. But we understand not everybody can start there, but you can at least take the crawl, walk, run approach. And this guide will help you get to that point. It's, as I mentioned earlier, these are nothing new. They are mapped back to NIST, CSF, and CIS controls. So if you do use any of the others, those others, we show you where they map back to. And then we provide, what our members felt would be the impact on users and the implementation costs. And we just broke that out to low, medium, high on those two. And so, and along with this, besides the essential protections, a single page document, these documents that have the single page for each protection, we also released an extensive guide on, okay, great, I've got this single page document, but how do I actually implement this stuff? So then we have and this is a fairly lengthy document, but it provides all the information on, say, if you weren't using malware or didn't have it configured the way you should, how you should potentially do that, and best practices to go about that. So the second piece is the district self-assessment tool. And now again, if you take this now, it's going to be still I guess I could call them the old 12. If you wait probably about 3 weeks or so, it'll be updated with the new ones. But again, this is just a questionnaire that's tied back to those essential protections that you go through and you answer honestly, and then you will get information. This is what the questionnaire looks like. One thing I'll mention about, or a couple of things I'll mention, is if you do go and take it, make sure you save the results at the end. We do not save any of the data, so you can't log back in and get it. You can take it as many times as you want, of course, but if you take it, just make sure you save out the information. The other thing I recommend on this self-assessment is, if you're in the IT department or that's your area, take it, go through it, answer it honestly. I also recommend you send it to your superintendent or your leadership and have them walk through it by themselves. And the reason I recommend this is they can go through this, and then you two can sit down together and kind of compare, and it gives you and them an idea of maybe where they don't understand where they need to be, or where the district or organization should be. So, but this is what it looks like for each, you go through, you answer the questions, and then what will happen is at the end of the assessment, you will get a score. Depending on how you answered, and it'll tell you, hey, this is how it was, weighted. This is what we feel your score is. It will give you specifics on what you need to do. So it'll say, okay, filter out malware. You didn't have it implemented. It's urgent. So here's some things you need to think about doing to get yourself to where you need to be. It's like I said, the other thing that you can also do with this, which I have people do, if after you take the assessment, if you want to go through and just select no on everything, then you can list out all the recommendations specifically. But it's a good way to just give you a very general baseline, very general cybersecurity risk assessment that you can then begin working towards where you need to be. And the other thing I'll mention is, we understand that you really need to, at some point, move to a much more comprehensive cybersecurity program like Cybersecurity Framework or CIS controls. And there may be some that are mandated by your state, but we understand also that you can't necessarily start there. So that's what all of this stuff is, that we have is to just help you get started and on towards that path. Now, the other piece of the essential protections is our cyber incident response runbook. This was another one that we had a lot of schools coming to us and saying, yeah, we know there's incident response guides out there, but they're 50 pages long and it's overwhelming. And so what we did is we followed the NIST incident response lifecycle guidelines, but we did the same thing. We had a member working group. We sat down and said, let's create a document that is much more digestible and easy to consume and use than the NIST documents. And so we came up with our runbook. It's made up of sections. The first section is what we call a quick response sheet. And this is something we've actually had a number of members that have had breaches said, I wish I would have had this before we had a breach. And so I'll tell you, if you don't do anything else with the guide, if you download it, at least fill out that quick response sheet. What that does is it's just a single place where you can list out all your important contacts. That's internal, external, that's your That's, that's your law enforcement contacts, your primary vendors, whatever it may be, you can list those out. And that way, if you do get into some type of incident, that should be printed out and you've got all that information on a single page that now you know who to contact. And part of that process is, and the part of the whole ransomware process is, or excuse me, incident response process is going through and learning that information. So, and then it's broken down into preparation, detection, analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, and post-incident. So in the document, it gives you a checklist and some different things that you need to think about in each of those phases. And one of the things I'll mention about incident response is, and this is just a general timeline of ransomware. And a lot of times people think, oh, we get ransomware and we'll be back to normal in a couple of weeks, couple of months. Not necessarily true. A lot of times, depending on the data that was ransomed, depending on if data was leaked, if it was, you could be dealing with this for years, up to 4 years or more. We've had, organizations have this, but this is just an idea for you to understand that, what you need to think about in the first hour, and up to 8 hours, and why you need to think about these things. And part of that incident response runbook that we have walks you kind of through all these different things so that you think about them and you're writing down, and this is what you would call a tabletop exercise, where you're going through this and just pretending, hey, we had an event. And what are we doing? Have we notified our insurance carrier? Do we, what do we need to do? When do we begin forensics? Have we notified law enforcement? Have we talked to legal? All these different things are things that you need to think about, and you want to do it before you're in the middle of an incident. And so this just goes into a little more things. Incident response starts with preparing, and again, that's what this guide does. There's really two things that we found that make a difference when an organization does have an event, and that's incident response planning, preparation, and cyber insurance. I'll talk about cyber insurance just a little bit because it's a whole nother topic on its own. But one of the things, but as far as the planning and preparation, this is important because this is, like it says, this is how you know what to do, when to do it, who is doing it, and how. So it's important to walk through again that plan and understand where you are, whose jobs or who's not. Hey, we're in the middle of an event right now, and now everybody's coming into a room. Nobody's ever talked. So-and-so's out today. You've got all that information. And then one of the things in cyber insurance, a lot of times people think cyber insurance it's just there to pay ransomware. It is there to pay for all kinds of things that you don't think about, costs that you may have. That's from, restoration. That could be people, if you have a big incident, your people are going to be tired. They can't work 24/7. You're going to need to bring in people to help. You may have to pay for that. You're going to need incident responders, true incident responders, company to come in and do forensics. That costs. You may have devices that you have to totally trash and rebuild. That's a cost. So cyber insurance helps pay for all of these things. And so just something to think about. And then these, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but these again are tied to the incident response. And what, again, these are the things that any IR coach hopes that you are asking as you're on your day-to-day or as you're working through a guide. Have you collectively gotten together and thought about your greatest risk? And meaning, what systems do we have that are our most critical systems that if those go down, it's really going to cause us trouble, financial, student information systems, whatever it may be. Do you have a plan? Is a big one. And like I mentioned, the cyber incident quick reaction sheet, just fill that out. If you don't have time, you say, you know what, we don't have time to do a whole tabletop, go through a plan, complete that quick reaction sheet. You will be way better off than a lot of people just by having that done. Do the members of your team know that they are on the team? Or did you just say, hey, so-and-so, we're going to add so-and-so here, but you never tell them? They need to understand their responsibilities, what they need to do during it. You need to have redundancies for everybody because somebody may be out, somebody may be sick, things like that. Who's the primary person? I'll give you an example of why it's important to, continually do this. I went to an FBI InfraGard meeting, and they did a presentation on a hostage event, and the guy, the local community that the event had happened in, the chief of police was like, I had my FBI contacts and things like that. He's like, the day this happened, I went and I called my FBI contact. I hadn't talked to her for about a month, and her phone was disconnected. And his whole point was, you just need to make sure all these contacts, all these things that you have are up to date, because just like in that case, hey, if you haven't updated it, now he's scrambling to find, well, who's my contact now? Same with all this stuff in an incident response plan. This goes for your third party. Another important thing I'll mention is if you do have cyber insurance and you do have, well, a couple of things first. So if you don't have an incident response team on standby, a company to do that, there are many companies out there that will do what's called a $0 master services agreement. And what that means is they'll come in and say, you sign this agreement, we get to know you, understand you, doesn't cost you anything. But if something does happen, we're already ready to go. You can pick up the phone and call us. And then you're not looking through the phone book trying to figure out, okay, well, who do we call? You've got somebody already online. You could do that same with legal. If you don't have legal, you can set up $0 master services agreements. Now, where this is important in cyber insurance is that a lot of times cyber policies, if you truly have a cyber policy, will designate who your incident response teams can be. So you want to make sure, if you have signed up or if you have somebody, that you notify your carrier. And it's easy to do, to say, hey, this is who we use for incident response. We want to make sure that their name is in our policy, so that if something does happen, the insurance company goes, well, great, yeah, you've got this company, but we didn't have them listed, so you can't use them. All that work you've done with them doesn't matter. You're going to have to use this company we designate. So just some things to think about. And then kind of the last or second to last one, have you practiced mock scenarios? That's a huge one. Do tabletop exercises, and you don't have to do it all the time, but having at least one is better than nothing. And as I mentioned, the new guide, the new protections that will be coming out will have a lot of this information around incident response planning. And if the current ones do not, but the new one will. And plus there's the incident response runbook. And then one of the last things I'll touch on is cyber insurance. It's, like I said, it's a whole nother topic, but ties into incident response and the essential protections. So what's interesting is insurance let me say it like this. When I went into schools in 2015, one of my first questions at the school was, do you guys have cyber insurance? And it was no. And I said, okay, well, we need to get it. Excuse me. Can you reach out to our provider? They did. And the only requirement, which I was a little bit shocked by, they sent back a single page document that had maybe 5 questions on it saying, are you doing these things? And I thought, I can't believe this is all they're asking to get a cyber policy. Well, that has changed. Basically, that's 180 from what it was then to what it is now. Now there's very significant requirements. One, to renew policies, if you've never had a policy, to write a policy. And what we found is that what the insurance companies found was, over this time period of a number of years, they found that, and this is specific, typically there's 9 to 12 controls that insurance companies have found that when they go in to organizations that have had breaches or organizations that they insure that have not had breaches, these are the things that they're doing. And so our essential protections align with this, not one-to-one, but very, very closely. And we didn't do that on purpose, which I think is kind of interesting, but we have had a number of insurance pools for different states that do insurance pools for K12 come to us and say, look, your essential protections are basically what's required for the underwriters. Can you work with us to do presentations for our members to help them understand? So, but my point of this is, these are things, the things that we recommend, the things that insurance recommends are things that can help your environment be secure. And some of them are easier to implement than others. But things that you should think about and look at and work towards. And hopefully the information, the tools that we provide can help you get to that. Now, a couple other things I'll mention before you open up for questions is I said all these things, all these tools that we developed, they're free if you're not a member. But if you do want to be a member and want to be involved in helping to create those documents, or if you just have something that you say, hey, there's something that that I think would benefit schools. Could you guys make this? Let us know. That's something we'll work on. If you're interested in being part of the work groups as a member, that's out there as well. And like I said, that's something that's very important for the essential protections. We spent for the first round quite a few months working with probably about 15 to 20 different members who were part of that working group to go through those. The same with incident response. So, a great way for you to get involved. And what I tell people too, a lot of times they'll say, well, I'd like to be involved, but I don't have any experience in cybersecurity. Good. That is the type of people we need. We need people to get involved because we are trying to gear a lot of this information to people that don't have that experience. And we want to make sure that it's readable by people that don't have experience, because there's plenty of it out there. There's plenty of documents out there that me as a cybersecurity professional has seen for a long time that I'm like, what the heck? This is ridiculous, and trying to implement this. So anyways, just the point being that if you want to get involved, please get involved, and no matter how it is, and share that information with your communities and others to help us just bring K12 security up to where it needs to be. So that's really all I have for presentation. We can, I guess, want to do jump to questions. We can do that.
Well, thank you, Eric. And yeah, let's see if we have any questions.
None were dropped in the chat, but at this time, we invite anyone, if they do have a question, to unmute.
Yeah, if you want to unmute or drop it in the chat, be happy to answer those.
Hi, Eric. So good to see you. This is Kika, and
Kika.
I do have a question.
Okay.
I'm curious about the tool that you showed for the malware tool. How can you give us a little bit more on that? How it works? How it gets?
The one that was the example.
Yes, it was at the beginning at
the open DNS probably.
Correct.
Yeah, so OpenDNS is a DNS. So of course there's malware protection, but one of the controls that a lot of frameworks recommend is DNS protection, so that when your DNS lookups are happening and things like that, those are protected. And so OpenDNS, which originally was just started as OpenDNS, but purchased by Cisco, is a free option that you can use to pass your DNS queries through their service. And what it will do is it will check for, if there's a DNS query that's maybe going to a malicious site, it can block that. So it's a tool that will allow you to do that. And they have both free and paid versions for that. And there's other companies out there that offer those types of DNS tools, not just Cisco OpenDNS. There's others out there as where Cloudflare is one. There's several others. So, but it's just one of a number of different tools and one specific way you can protect your network. And like I mentioned, the single page document just has a brief information on that, but the larger document, which is probably, I don't know how many pages, probably 30 or 40 pages, gives a much more detail. And again, anybody can download that from our website. Gives a very detailed listing of how you could implement that or any DNS. So did that answer your question?
I've been talking and it was on mute. Yes, thank you, Eric.
Okay, very good. And I saw somebody's hand up a second ago. I don't know if they.
Yeah, I was just typing my question in the chat, but I can speak it too.
Okay.
Hi. I'm Sean Nelson from CISA 6, which I guess the number 6 comes up a lot for some reason in this meeting. But so I was just wondering about tabletop exercises.
Sure.
We haven't done a tabletop exercise, but I do have that as a line item in our CSF implementation that it's not fully implemented, but
Right.
is there a resource that you know of that we can see a tabletop exercise being done, or perhaps get some live guidance through one?
I don't have a specific. There's probably some, YouTube videos that now the guide that I mentioned that we created, it's pretty simple if you want to download it, the way you walk through it. There is actually, let me find it. There is actually a card. Yeah, that's it, Ben. Thanks, Ben. The Backdoors and Breaches card game is a great tool. It's you can reach out. They're free. They'll give them to you for free. But it's a card game, and it kind of walks you through. Yeah, that's right. I forgot they have an online version now. But it walks you through. And so what you could do is you could take our guide and use it to walk you through the Backdoors and Breaches card game. And it's a great way. And you can make it as simple or as difficult as you need to do. So, very easy to do. And that's the thing about a tabletop. A lot of times people think they have to be this very detailed. A first tabletop can be as simple as, actually what I would probably say to, an initial tabletop that would be a good exercise is just take that quick response cybersecurity response sheet from our guide, sit down, and that be your first tabletop. Walk through it together and just answer the questions. That right there, that's a tabletop, very basic. And you're just, all it's having you do is think about key personnel and key systems. So you could start there, and then you could move on to some of these other, like I said, Backdoors and Breaches is a great one. And it's, and I forgot they do have it online now. So you can set it up, and we've done that a couple of times at K12 6 for some of our meetings, set up, and a small incident response group and done it online. So hopefully that answers your question.
That answers it very well. Thank you so much. And for the links that the community has dropped into chat.
Sure. And actually, I think Mike, looks like he had a question in there about best practices for pen testing. So for pen testing, I typically tell people, unless you're a very mature organization, to hold off on pen testing. Because if you are not to a certain point, what's going to happen? Somebody's going to come in and do a pen test. They're going to breach your network and give you a bunch of information, and you're going to be at the same place you are going, okay, well, how do we fix all this stuff? So, and also the other thing too, to clarify, a lot of times the term penetration test and vulnerability assessment get mixed up when they're different things. A vulnerability. So I like this analogy to help people understand is, think about a house. If I'm going to do a vulnerability assessment for your house, I'm going to walk up and I'm going to see if your door's unlocked, if your window's open, check all those things, but I'm not going to go in your house. A penetration test is going to be, I'm going to go up to your house, check and see if a door's open or unlocked. If it's unlocked, I'm going in and I'm going to see what I can take. That's the difference. So typically you want to be on some type of path to some type of framework, whether it's, our controls or whatever it may be. Get there, do a vulnerability scan, and there are some free resources for, CISA does free vulnerability scanning for your public, and they do it weekly once you sign up. So, but do that first, and then once you get remediated, and then once you get to you're a little more mature, then I would say that's the time you want to do penetration testing. So I don't know, Mike, does that answer your question?
Yes, Eric, thank you very much.
Okay, great. And Tracy asked the name of our guide. So it's just the Cyber Incident Response Runbook. Yeah, and Ben dropped the link in there. If you just go to that link, you can download everything we talked about today from that link. Will be available there.
Hey, Eric,
Yeah.
Ben, can you mention, a few weeks ago, you guys did the Microsoft assessment.
Workshop?
Yeah, the workshop.
Oh, yeah.
The links on that and talk about that.
Sure. So, and just so you guys know, Ben is one of our members, and he's been very instrumental in helping with the different guides. So, yeah, so what we've also done, and this is something that is open, that if you want us to bring it to any of your districts or organizations, we're happy to do it. It's free, it's no charge, as an incident response workshop. And basically what we do, it's a full day event. The first half of the day is planning. So kind of some of the stuff I touched on with our guide, we go through that in much more detail the first half of the day, so that, when you come out of that first half, you can basically have gone through that full run book and understand kind of the things you need to do. Have lunch. The second half of the day is Microsoft basically is providing a virtual environment so that you can do be in an environment that an actual ransomware incident has occurred. And so what will happen is you'll be walked through, okay, there's a ransomware incident that's occurred. What do you need to look for in your different, different tools, different log files, things like that. And it's a very hands-on environment so that you get the chance to walk through that and understand some things you need to look at and think about in that event. So those are just called our incident response workshop. Like I said, we're right now I'm planning several other ones. Most of them we will have a virtual option. So if you can't attend in person, if it's a location, you can do that. But if you do want us to do one specific to your organization, we can do that as well. So, but those are, that's a great way to, if you're not sure about incident response and what you need to do and how you need to do it, that's a great way to do it, because we pretty much walk you through everything.
Wonderful. Does anyone else have anything?
Anyone else?
Well, if
one thing I'll just remind everybody is, if you do download the essential protection, the runbook will not change. That's going to be set for a while because we just released that. The essential protections, if you do download those now, they are going to change, not significantly. A lot of them will be the same, but there will be some new ones. Probably in the next 3 weeks we'll release that. But if you've downloaded the current version, you'll get an email saying, hey, we're releasing the new version. But I just want to remind everybody that don't necessarily, if you're going to utilize those, don't necessarily start down that path just yet, because it's good to review them and understand, because like I said, they're not changing a lot, but at least wait a couple of weeks, and that way you can be on the current version.
Wonderful. And yes, everyone will get this recording after everything. It'll get sent out to everyone who registered. And then, Eric, I'm not sure if there's any certain contact information.
Yeah, let me put in the chat. It's in the presentation, so people can, when you
perfect.
send it out, but I'll put it in the chat as well. But my email, so yes, if you have any questions, comments, please reach out. The other one is SOC. The SOC, you can always contact our SOC if you have questions, if you have an incident that you've heard about, or in your environment that you say, hey, we've seen this. You can always let our SOC know and they can investigate. But yes, feel free to reach out with any questions, concerns, recommendations. That's another big one. Like I said, all this stuff we do comes from recommendations from schools, non-members and members. So feel free to say, hey, you know, I would, this is something that we need. Would you guys work on this? Let us know. We'd be more than happy to do that.
You know, it always surprises me that cybersecurity isn't anything new. You know, I remember still the days of the I love you virus. I don't know if some of you
Yep.
might still remember that. That was my very first experience with the cybersecurity when I started working at WiscNet. And but it just there's so much to learn still, you know, about cybersecurity and these frameworks, and there is so much out there. We really do appreciate, you know, the effort and what you guys are doing for the K12s, because I think what got me sold was how easy those documents are, easy to follow. You know, nobody's got the time to go through 100 pages of anything. So this is very helpful. We are very thrilled to be a part of this too, and to pass on to our members what we have been learning from you guys. And we hope that our membership will add more, you know, to this effort and make it even richer.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. And one thing I'll say to one of your points about security, so and that I, you know, let people know a lot of time the breaches and everything that happens, they're the basics, you know, which is really what our documents are. That insurance document, they're the basics. They're not these you know, complicated things, and they've been the same for years. You know, so that's what I tell people a lot of times. Just focus back down to the basics, get those knocked out. You'll be way better off than most people. Let's see. Okay, so the E-rate question, Mike. Yeah, you know, the FCC unfortunately doesn't. Well, one of the problems is they don't really understand cybersecurity. And so just to let you know, Doug Levin, who's the national director for K12-6, he does a lot. He's up in the DC area. He does a lot of outreach with both state and local legislators, federal legislators, FCC, stuff like that. And you know, there was, I think COSIN put out a document about trying to use E-rate for things a year, maybe 2 years ago. And it was good, but the problem was the recommendations, or what E-rate said they would cover, were things like, you know, firewalls and stuff that schools now already have. You know, very rarely do we come across a school that does not have a firewall, or, you know, some of the basic stuff. So this is an issue. I don't know if E-rate's ever going to address it, unfortunately. I think it will come. I don't know if you saw recently, just this week, there was you know, CISA came out and said there's some funding that's made available. This is also, it's not new. This is something that they've been working on for a while. That will be specific. CISA is saying it is specific for cybersecurity, not for schools, but states. But that's the problem with it, is since it's not specific to schools, you have to go to your state and request, say, hey, I want to be part of that grant from CISA. And then the state has to take it and say, okay, well, now we're going to dole it out to who we think needs it most. And what we found, unfortunately, is usually schools are at the bottom of that list. Now, one of the things, I guess, if there's a positive that's come out of some of these breaches, especially the LA USD one, because it was so large, is that it's you know, people are noticing that maybe in the past hadn't, and going, okay, schools need help. So that's something we continually work for, is how can you know, schools get that help. And just so you know, the other thing we're working on as well is, because we understand having these guides and stuff is just one piece of it. A lot of time schools are like, great, that even though you've reduced this guide, we still don't have, you know, the ability to monitor our systems or do this or help implement. That's the other things we're trying to work on too, is how can we do something where we have, you know, a SOC that would allow us to monitor what you're doing and that type of thing. So, you know, a lot of that stuff is stuff we're working on. But that's the other thing, guys. If any input you have, Mike, or anybody else on that kind of stuff, send that to us. And then drop Doug's the Twitter feeds in there. Doug Levin's very active on his Twitter feed. tweet him and say, look, this is what we want to see from schools. And, you know, the more we get of that information from schools saying, this is what we need, this is what we want, the more we can take that and go advocate for you guys at those levels to try and get, you know, some help in those areas. So hopefully
Thank
that
you,
answers
Eric.
your question, Mike.
Yep. Thank you.
All
Any
right. Does
last
anyone have anything
questions?
else? All right. Well, you have all of some contact information in the chat, and then if you have anything, feel free to reach out to any of us, especially Eric and his team. And then this recording will be sent out shortly. Thank you all for joining. Ivor, do you have anything else?
Well, I want to say thank you to Eric for being here and sharing your knowledge, and to everyone else. And we'll see you all soon.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for letting me speak to you.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, sir. Thanks
Have a
all.
good one. Bye.
Bye.